we delivered. Guam AutoSpot is extending our overstock sell-off with the hottest deals on island, like our 2025 GMC Canyon with $4,000 off. Or slide into a brand new Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross, starting at just $24,995. September is your chance to drive big and save even bigger. Visit us today or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com or call 478-AUTO. Guam AutoSpot, where the savings never stop.
Buy fuel, get Wendy's. Drive to your nearest 76 Circle K and get free Wendy's. Yes, free. Fuel up with $30 and score your choice of a 6-piece crispy chicken nuggets or a juicy junior cheeseburger deluxe. Fresh, hot, and packed with flavor. But hurry, quantities are limited and this delicious deal won't last long. So hit the road to 76 Circle K, fuel up, and get Wendy's free before it's gone.
It's me, Wednesday Addams. I regret to inform you that I have devised the meal of misfortune with Wendy's. Normally I'd be against this type of capitalistic corporate synergy. But when the other pigtailed provocateur said I could concoct my own Frosty, I melted. My meal is tribute to the suffering that awaits us all. It's pure torture for your taste buds, with 4 nightmarish dips of dread. Don't waste my time asking which ones you'll get. You must surrender to your fate. Enjoy the anguish.
Dare to try? Something new? Life's too short!
You gotta chill with the snackable drink.
Life is too short. Hey, you gotta chill.
Mogu Mogu.
Moku moku!
Good Morning Show with Troy Torres is brought to you by 76 Circle K Guam.
Good morning, my dear friends. It is 9:54 a.m. on Friday, September 19, 2025. My name is Troy Torres. Thank you so much, Mark Anthony and Auntie Lonnie Salas, for joining, and all of you who are joining live on this show, and those of you who will watch the replay. I very much appreciate it. This morning, I did a little bit of reporter stuff, and I said it last night, set up a meeting, a Zoom meeting to happen. Good morning, Rita Arceo. To happen at 8:30 this morning. I was a little bit late for it, but it was an interview with Senator Chris Duenas. He's the chairman of the Legislative Budget and Finance Committee, and he's also the guy, along with Senator Sabrina Salas-Matsinani, who have been leading the legislative charge to figure out whatever is going on over at Guam Memorial Hospital. I think we all know what's going on over at Guam Memorial Hospital. So the focus of our discussion this morning was on solutions. And at the end of this interview, because you're going to want to stick around for it, he made an announcement that deals with the corruption stuff that we have been uncovering here at Kandit and over at KOAM. So without further ado, here is that interview with Senator Chris Duenas. Hi, good morning. It is just before 9 a.m. It's 8:36 a.m. on Friday, September 19, 2025. I'm here with Senator Chris Duenas, who's joining me at his office via Zoom. Good morning, Senator.
Of a day, Troy, and thank you for the invitation to sit with you and go over a few things.
Thank you for accepting. I very much appreciate your time today. And in respect to your time, let's just get straight to it. Over the past few weeks, there has been a jostling between the administration and the legislature about Guam Memorial Hospital, and even from within the legislature. This is not anything that most of us are unfamiliar with. This seems like replay of jostling of the past, and whether it's Democrats or Republicans in the administration or in control of the legislature, these are the same things happening over and over. So give us your general thoughts, and then we'll get into the questions.
Sure. So, Troy, my general thoughts is, I'm very proud of the Republican caucus, starting from the 36th Guam legislature into the 37th, and now in the 38th, on attempting to address the perennial issues with Guam Memorial Hospital. If you remember, in the 36th Guam legislature, all of the focus coming down on the current hospital, as opposed to all the discussion on the new hospital that we've been talking about and battling over as well, was culminated when basically one of the nurses came down, a group of nurses, but definitely one was a standout, Elizabeth Flores, and basically kind of said, listen, folks, we are not going to survive another typhoon. Our hospital is in shambles, it's crumbling, and what are you doing about it? And so that point, Republicans did a resolution to where we said, hey, look at all these things that are going on. We even discussed the possibility of federal receivership. But what happened after that was an appropriation of $30 million, because that's the perennial issue that they fall in a couple of years of backlog of responsibilities, particularly around vendor payments and other situations, that it's just that constant struggle financially for the hospital, right? So we appropriated that 30 million, and that retired that debt, and they were good for a little while. And then we continued to appropriate record numbers of revenue in their budgets, along with the Democrats. Of course, that was chaired by Joe San Augustine and other health chair and the like. They definitely went from where they used to get a pittance really of 3.74 million, from the general fund. The pharmaceuticals fund always tracked lower because in the prior years on the Camacho and Cabo administrations, of course, the general fund revenue wasn't so large. And that's a formula base for the pharmaceuticals fund, right? This pharmaceuticals fund probably in those days was maybe $8-9 million. Now it's like $27 million because it's benchmarked on a formula against the general fund revenue. So if you look at all the evolution over time, and then in the 37th Guam legislature, we started to say, okay, it's not just the 30 and 40 million baseline that the hospital needs. We did a supplemental budget, put another 20 million in there. And that's what they're operating under right now, basically about a $55 million budget subsidy from the legislature, way over what used to happen in the past. Come to the issue of the fight of the budget, right? And so the budget, of course, as you know, the revenues adopted by the governor ended up being equivalent or equal to what OFB and our team did and the legislature did. And so really it was a fight over BPT. And so the BPT fight continued. We got 11 votes for our budget. And so in the middle of that, the governor sent down a supplemental budget and really focused on the issue of, okay, we'll agree with you on the rollback of the BPT, but put that $40 million over to the hospital. And we said, well, now here we're going down the road of essentially saying, you're going to send us a political conundrum to where you're poising that we're choosing either between, a relief for businesses and relief from the BPT versus the hospital, when we have both had the same revenues for the hospital in our budgets. In fact, the legislature went further, Troy. The first 20 million of excess revenue in 2026 will go to the hospital. So if our budget passes, if we override the governor at the end of the month, the hospital is looking at right around a $70 million subsidy from the legislature in terms of general fund revenue. And then there are other bills. We also, the governor,
can I stop you there, though, Senator? Can I stop you there, Senator, on the possibility of a $70 million subsidy for the hospital through fiscal year 26? What about the issue of, how certain can you be about that $20 million in unappropriated or in excess, quote unquote, excess revenue for fiscal year 26, a fiscal year that hasn't started yet?
Great question, Troy. So right now we're going to have a CRER probably by tomorrow or by Monday. And right now in the current fiscal year, we're tracking probably somewhere around $65 million in excess revenue this year. We really don't see that changing very much next year. The buildup is still very strong. Withholding is very, very strong. We actually think the BPT impact might be a little bit less than what's being projected at the 41 million. As you know, there was an amendment to the budget that capped $10 million for military contracts. So a lot of those big contracts are still going to be at 5%. So we're thinking maybe the impact might be somewhere around 18, 20, maybe 24 million, somewhere in there instead of the 41. The other issue, Troy, is Rev and Tax has been underperforming grossly in terms of collections, in terms of implementation of the customs user fee. There's a lot of things we're not doing to generate revenue that's due to the government as well. So we believe that the revenues are going to continue to track strong in terms of excess revenue. Certainly the first 20 million should be safe.
So why don't you guys put your money where your mouths are and increase the revenue line then? Rather than, make this pledge in your budget. You know what I mean? Rather than, because you're certain of it.
But Troy, essentially we did, because if we obligated the first $20 million, that's already appropriated, meaning that can't go anywhere else. Here's the example. CLTC right now is planning in their board meetings how to spend the $9 million that was placed in the current fiscal year that has been given to them in cash. Because the first pledge of the excess revenue of 2025 was $9 million to CLTC. That could not have been touched. And then there was other pledges beyond that for appropriations at up to and around 35 million. And then we did some additional appropriations in 426. But when you look at 26 revenues going forward, essentially we did that, Troy. We made sure that the first 20 million is already appropriated to the hospital.
But isn't that going to cause some problems with the audit?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think the CLTC issue caused anything with the audit. But gosh, talking about audits, what a mess, huh? The reason why we basically can't even finish the 2024 right now, and we've only basically going to start the 2024. Most entities have already gotten everything, and we're waiting on Department of Education. And they don't even have a trial balance for us for the OPA so that it can get started. But the OPA says if they get DOE and the trial balance in for 2024, he looks forward to maybe being able to finish it by January. That's going to be a dated report, but that's also going to tell us a lot of information, Troy. But I don't think it messes up with the audit. The only time it would really get precarious is if it wasn't tracking.
I'm glad for this segue, because as you were talking about the audit situation, it brought to mind one of the governor's proud points about her administration is her financial stewardship of the government of Guam. But obviously you're calling some of that into question, but it provides a segue into her top priority since coming to office, and that has been medical care and specifically Guam Memorial Hospital, right? What criticisms do you have about the governor, and all things considered, with the current state of Guam Memorial Hospital, and what can she do better? What do you hope that she does better?
Well, one thing, Troy, that I got to tell you is that even in my talks with her, and these are not private, she's acknowledged that I've had conversations with her about the hospital. She's had requests since I've been the chairman on certain different things to do with the hospital. In fact, we understand, and we've known now, it's been publicly stated that at GITA, we're awaiting the results of a review that was commissioned. And in my conversation with her in late May and early June, actually, she had stated that it will come out in weeks, and this was going to be the roadmap of how to fix the perennial issues at the hospital. She gave me some insight that there's going to be some, issues in there that are going to point to management issues and structural issues internally. So the governor also, and if you watch the hearings, Troy, on the 40 million and even on the budget, Ed Byrne and Lester Carlson, you can see them biting their tongue and kind of champing at the bit, because they've also told me off the record that they've had very frustrating communications with the hospital in terms of managing the cash. In fact, the governor's bill wanted to have DOA manage all of the cash in that 40 million. senators wanted to just give it to the hospitals, so it ended up being under their control. That the governor took a couple days to sign the bill, but she finally signed the bill for the 40 million. So I just think I'm gonna have to just say it this way. I think the governor hasn't been forthright about the fact that she's frustrated with the way internal controls and management are happening over at. We're going to send you this report, Troy. The OPA, I sent it to him, and he was like, "Wow." He looked at vendor payables. You know what one of the hugest vendor payable is, Troy? $8.4 million to the self-insurance program. That means all those employees over there that are relying on the remittances for self-insurance and their insurance program is behind. It's a vendor payable to the government of Guam, 8.4 million. You know what the next one is? $4.8 million for withholding. That means the withholding issues, of taxes that are going to rev and tax, for the employees is not being remitted. Retirement is about 1.2 million. Troy, if you're working over there right now and you put 35 hard years in as a nurse or as somebody who's been giving care to our people for that long, there's a chance that when you go up to the retirement fund, they're going to say, you know what? We can't process your retirement right now until they pay us off because they owe us $1.1 million. So it's not just supplies. It's not just pharmaceuticals. It's not just issues with the panel. It's not just those kind of things. It's fundamental structural things that are being deducted from employees' paychecks that are not being remitted. So that tells you that it cannot be just an issue of funding. It has to be an internal situation, and it might have to do, and I said this to the governor, and I think the report's going to bear this out. Troy, I think they're just overstaffed in areas that are non-critical care. And this is where you've talked about how we got to build in accountability, how we have to start not just using budget hearings to say, we got long-term care of FSM patients, we got non-payers, we got this. I don't dispute any of that, Troy, but we've had those for the last 30 years, and this is the worst that it's been. So I'm just going to say, Troy, I think there hasn't been enough attention on the fact that there are fundamental issues at the hospital that need to be fixed structurally, in terms of the way the staffing pattern is working. I know right now when we had pre-budget meetings, they actually had $3.5 million in budgeted vacancies. And I asked, well, what are you doing with this revenue? Because obviously you're not hiring, which is probably good because I don't think you need to right now. But they said, yeah, we use that for overtime. So it's kind of a built-in budgetary mechanism to where they can use warm body positions where cash is there to cover overtime. Now, don't think for a minute that I don't know that they need overtime in a lot of different areas, particularly in nursing. And of course, they still have the perennial issue of paying the travel nurses. So I'm not going to say that they could turn it over tomorrow and manage with the cash that they have. But I think there's a lot of missed opportunities, and I think there's some things that they're not doing that other management would do that is done in the past to do cost containment.
Let me know whether this is a fair question or whether this is an uneducated or ignorant question. But my next question is, why didn't you guys, if you knew about, maybe you didn't know the exact cost, maybe you could have asked for an exact cost if you didn't have it. But I think we all kind of know and knew going into the budget process that Guam Memorial Hospital needed money for certain things like an electrical panel, mode mitigation, maternity ward renovations, etc., right? Why weren't those things built into the budget?
So that's a great question, Troy. The bottom line is it came down to this. I said, what is the governor's request for your budget? They said, well, it's like yours. It's about $52 million. I said, so what are you asking for in addition to that? And they said, well, we're asking for these CIPs. I said, remind me how we got to this CIP issue. Well, you remember in February, we had to tell you that the governor clawed back $20 million from our CIPs that we were under procurement for to put into the new hospital fund because there was a deadline to dedicate that funding source where it would go, right? So I said, okay, here we are. So we're sitting here with a about $31 million overall request for not operational issues, but for issues associated with capital improvement projects. And I said, that's not typical to have capital improvement projects in a budget because it's a large capital outlay. Have you talked about any financing scheme, any other way to manage this? Because I don't see how the governor is going to have the same numbers we have and still give you an additional 45 million dollars that you're asking for. And so in essence, they said, you're right. So I talked about various different opportunities. At that time, I still believe that, and I still believe the $35 million that was set aside in the 2021 appropriations, basically, as far as I'm concerned, in that fiscal year that was identified, they said, it's a non-starter. They keep telling us the money's not there. So I said, this is what we'll do. We'll contemplate the budget the way it is. We'll get to the point where we're have your oversight hearing, and then we'll go to the budget process and see where the give and take was. Troy, nobody had the answer for the CIPs within the budget. And so everybody agreed on the numbers. So it came down to, we're going to have to find that money within the fiscal year, basically through budgetary surpluses. Because remember, they were requesting this money for 2026 anyways, which means they were planning on doing the projects during the fiscal year. So we kind of agreed we're going to scrape some things together. They said they probably have $10 million in grant money that they were kind of counting on. And we said to ourselves, well, let's get through this. And what we'll do is we will know that we have to come up with that in the fiscal year. So that's where the 20 million came into play. We said, you know what? Why don't we start doing it? And that's what we started doing during the budget process. They said, okay, we'll put the first 20 million of excess revenue of 2026 to you. That will take care of should take care of at least the panel and maybe the information system and their cybersecurity.
Can their certifying officer sign off on an RFP, or whoever sign off on an RFP over there without the realization of those excess revenues first?
So I know definitely not. But the thing is that's why we're here now. What we want to do is go up and talk to them now, because obviously the governor knows that she's got $40 million in this fiscal year. So I'm hoping that when we go up there, they say, you know what, Senator, we have issued the RFP, or we've got a purchase order now for the RFP, which will carry over to the next fiscal year because we're using 2025 revenues. And so this is why we want to say, listen, all we're asking is this. We're here to talk to you and work with you. We want to know, since the 40 million passed, have we locked down the vendor payables? Are we starting to retire those, especially on the supplies areas and things that are critical to services, right? The next key question is, do you have already the assessment? Have you renewed or activated the MOU with GPA? And are you ready to say to us that you're ready to put out an RFP based on funds availability, that you can cut a purchase order right now for an estimated cost? And I understand they have an estimated cost. I think it's anywhere between 3.5 upwards of maybe 7 million.
So now they have an estimated cost. Now they have one. I remember Senator Sabrina Salas-Matanani in January asking for that estimated, Senator Shelley Calvo too, asking for this estimated cost. They only came now? The estimated costs only came now?
Well, now, because this is what I even learned by leaning over on during the committee of the whole and talking to some of the folks, and I said, can you give me a breakdown here? They said, Senator, the current panel has some operational needs. I believe it's the breakers. I think certain breakers are probably overloaded. The long-term plan is to move the panel. And this is where a lot of people didn't understand this. They want the full change out is to relocate the panel, which means building a whole new panel, while the existing panel, because it's co-located with the water tank.
Water tank, yeah.
The water storage tank. That, water, electricity, I mean, even the basics of us knows that they don't mix, right?
Genius planning in the government of Guam.
But even right now, as they isolate that panel, here's the issue that I've been able to ascertain through conversations with engineers and others that have done the assessment up there. The panel itself, from what I've heard, is structurally sound and can still manage the full load on a generator or on GPA at the hospital with some upgrades. It's downstream of the panel which caused the problems. This sounds a lot like public health. You know what happened at public health when people would say, hey, you went up there was a panel, and modern days came along and we're using split unit ACs, different fans, different things, computer systems, and all of a sudden you started to see these step down breakers from the main panel, overloading the main panel. And that actually, from what I heard, that was actually what caused their smoke event or whatever fire event up there. It was overloading a panel that was not designed for all of the new things that they were putting onto it to be able, just like in your house. I mean, if you added so many new features to the house you're in right now, guaranteed you'd have to call an electrician in and then either have to upgrade the breakers that are in your panel, or they'd have to do a sub panel to make sure that it carried all the other loads separately and didn't overload your main panel. That's what I'm hearing. So the fix to the down, the downstream from the panel is probably what this main fix is going to be. It's going to one individual that told me what he saw when he went there is he said the main panel looks good, it's intact. GPA has said that's good to go. They've dusted it off. It's operational. Downstream from that, Troy, this guy said it's a bowl of spaghetti.
Okay.
And so essentially, it's not coordinated, and it's not to work with all those split units that they put in. Remember the talk about how a room had a split unit and they're like, how come it's not running? Because it didn't have electricity to it yet, because it wasn't designed to be like that. That was the chiller issue. When they had that chiller, when the chiller went down, they had all these floor units in the units. They were installing these window units to try to get by before the chiller was replaced. So it really is, there's two phases to fix this problem, but the first phase, from what I understand, is somewhere in the neighborhood of $3.5 upwards to $5 million.
Okay, let's not get into the weeds and things like that. Okay, so I have your answers on those things. Fair enough. What are you and Senator Sabrina Salas-Matsinani doing to prepare for the oversight here? What homework are you guys doing to prepare for this oversight hearing so that it's not a dog and pony show, the sort of thing that we've seen in the past in past legislatures, where it didn't really look like there was a game plan or a purpose to these oversight hearings? What's going on?
So as you see in the release is structured around everything we've just been talking about. All basically of the CIPs going forward. What's the roadmap? And so the idea is to now, instead of constantly getting into a situation where there's debt load at the hospital, and then the perennial answer is we've got vendor payables, we've got CIPs outstanding. So what we're trying to accomplish here is getting in there and saying, okay, are you going to be stable with the $50 to $55 million on your operations side on operating the hospital? And is it truly the CIPs that are hanging out over here? Because what we want to see is currently the $40 million was supposed to at least handle electrical and some of the issues with regard to the CIPs. If that's true and it gets handled here, Troy, then we know that the first 20 million in excess revenue next year, as well as other bills, that there's three other bills that have been introduced, Troy, and I'll get you the numbers later so you can go through them with your guests and the people who watch your show, which is quite a few. The thing is that the things going forward, we have a $19 million by Talatidegui. We have $32 million by Sabrina Salas-Matsinani. This is for the revenue that was realized when we went out and refied the BPT bonds. And that's what the governor actually put in her budget when she tried to get us to entertain her budget. It's real money. And so those bills are available. There's also another $10 million that the hospital told us about, that they were being underfunded on the pharmaceuticals fund. Basically, they said, if you go back these last 5 fiscal years, there hasn't been an adjustment to what the pharmaceuticals was tracking because of the excess revenue. So they believe that that's $10 million. We could have a package of probably another $42 million in the next 3 months. But we want to make sure, Troy, are they going to be able to make that hospital sound and put in all the improvements and do the CIPs and cash manage on the side with the 50-some million dollars that they've been given to their operations, so that we can see if there's a truing up of the operation. And if not, where are they going to be able to contain costs? Is their staffing pattern truly what they need in terms of employment, or do they have employment that they could possibly transfer out somewhere else to contain money? Because their staffing pattern right now looks at about 1,280 employees. And we know by just discussing with GRMC, they run at somewhere around 700 to 720 employees for the same size hospital, not the perennial issues, but basically the same bed capacity. And know the payer mix is different. I'm not trying to say it's apples and apples, but if you just look at the plant itself and operational needs staffing wise, there's like a 600 to 700 employee difference.
That's also a 30% increase in number of FTEs from the Calvo administration.
I believe that's tracking. I believe
Yeah.
that's
No,
tracking.
I remember that in the Calvo administration, FTE at GMH was below 1,000.
Yeah. And so it really we just have to be real. We have to put it on the table. And the fact is that also, Troy, I've talked to some nurses, and I'm glad they've been frustrated and they've talked to me. And then they let me have it, which is fine. A couple of them said, you're finger pointing, knock it off, and all this. And I said, can we sit down and talk?
Senator, they have a point. Both the legislature and the governor. I mean, it was exhausting. It was nauseating. Can I just be as real as possible with you? Nauseating to see the legislature and the governor pointing the finger over those couple of weeks, and the hyperbole was pretty up there. And it's to the point that I made in the beginning, we've heard this all before, and the hyperbole didn't help. If I could just be so blunt.
Sure. So, and I said to one of them, I said, can I just ask you this? Do you remember back in the 36th Guam legislature when your entire team came down, and at the frontline worker level, I could see the management in the back just cringing, and the facial expressions and everything else was, oh boy, what is this going to mean now? Because they basically just came down and spilled the beans, and they were chastising their own management. They were chastising the internal situations at GMH. And so we responded by making sure they had additional revenue. We responded by trying to do the best we could with budgets. We responded with trying to get the truth. And it seems like from that moment, when Elizabeth Flores and that entire panel said, enough is enough. You guys don't understand what we're going through. From that moment, we just don't seem to have made any meaningful progress, even though there's been lots of additional revenue going forward. So when I sat down with a couple of the nurses and they said, okay, let's have this conversation. So I pointed out what we've been trying to do and where they came from the beginning. It's not like they walked away and said, you're absolutely right, Mr. Duenas, you know what I mean? But they could see my point of view, that something needs to break. There has to be a reality check on what is true versus what is not necessarily true. And also, are they being used, as basically this political tool in the middle for a fight? And I think it's unfair on both sides.
It almost sounds to me, after listening to what you're saying and after reviewing what's been coming out of the administration, that you and the governor are on the same page practically.
We are actually. If you really, if you sat down with Ed Byrne right now and Lester Carlson, and you sat down with folks, they would say, Ed Byrne, if you just go back to the tapes, Ed Byrne said on this conversation back and forth on who should control the money, he would oftentimes say, well, during my time, I made sure that we had money for this, we had money for this. During my time, we were collecting at a higher rate.
Because Ed Byrne he was the CFO over at Guam Memorial Hospital. And before that, he was in the business office. Yes.
That's right. And even as far back as Joe Mesa. Remember Joe Mesa? I mean, that this issue has been perennial. Let's go down memory lane, Troy. We remember even Carlotta Leon Guerrero, during the Camacho time. The bottom line is between the Camacho and the Calvo administrations, they had 1 or 2 point people at Adelup all the time that were constantly having to make sure that everything in JMH was sorted out. And it was generally around payroll, because that was the time that would always, kick in terms of where they'd start to say, hey, it became a law. You cannot do net payroll. You have to do gross payroll. I mean, it was a lot of things to where there was a lot of breathing down their neck. Remember during that time, the CCU actually you were still with us at that time, and said they're shutting the power off. Mm-hmm. You remember that, right? They said, you don't make full payment today, we're shutting it off. So we've been through this push and pull, but I've seen in situations where the prior administrations, they have at least 2 or 3 point people that are co-managing resources at the hospital. I don't know that that's happening right now.
Is it safe to say, Senator, that now that we're past the period of the hyperbole and the finger pointing, right? I think we're safe to say we're past the point of the finger pointing. So is it safe to say that it's no longer an either or situation between a commitment to fixing the current hospital versus a commitment to building a new hospital? Because for a little bit there, it looked like it was an either-or situation.
I think so, Troy. I think we owe it to our people. We owe it to our people. We owe it to the people that work at the hospital. The bottom line is these are exclusive issues. And the BPT also is an exclusive issue, Troy.
Yeah.
It's fiscal management. You've pointed out, and I want to announce to you today that this is the beginning of a year-long fiscal policy of this 38th Guam legislature. So everything that you've been talking about in terms of, where have you guys been? There's been a plan for this going forward. And that is to now bring agencies in. We're going to start with the first month, and it's going to be quarterly with all the big guys and even the small guys in terms of how they're spending on things that are being discovered right now on misspending.
Are you talking about the corruption stuff? The allegations of corruption?
We are going to have the hearings, Troy, that will bear out how are you spending your money and why. Wherever that leads, we'll see where it leads.
When will it start?
It will start basically once we get this budget passed. We will have meetings in October, and then throughout the whole fiscal year, going into this next fiscal year, it will start. I don't know how much we'll do around November and December, but definitely January all the way through the rest of the year will be constant monitoring of the budget.
You, through your committee on finance, will be calling in the agencies every month?
We will be working. This is the start of joint hearings. So we will work with all of the other committees. So essentially, it will be joint hearings, but the primary focus will be finance, which means we're going to comb through the finances. Troy, there's a project that's being worked on by OFB right now, and we'll get the report soon. There is going to be considerable lapses in this government that are tracking. And that means that either there's too much money in some of these agencies, or they're being constrained on their spending, or a variety of different things. But Troy, I want to just make this pronouncement today and why I was confident with the BPT rollback. We don't have a fiscal problem right now. We have a fiscal management problem. I believe that to my core. There is enough money in this government to operate properly. The problem is there's all this appropriation authority that the legislature is giving away. And this governor has the keys to the castle. This is probably one of the easiest budgets to manage for any governor because there's so much embedded revenue that can be moved around. That's why I gave her 50% transfer authority, saying if you have any issues, you certainly have a checkbook that you can write checks with.
Senator, before we run out of time on this call, my last question for you is, I'm sure you've been watching the things that we've been uncovering and also that KOAM has been uncovering. How concerned are you about these allegations of corruption in the executive branch?
I'm very concerned, Troy. It affects all of us. And the bottom line comes down to this. It's always about follow the money, right? You can have, and you guys have done a wonderful job in showing a lot of, inconsistencies and things that on their face look like procurement that is not right and not done right and basically borders on or is outright illegal. But the way to get there is you have to have people on the record sworn in explaining why they've done procurement and why they've spent the way they've spent.
What happens if they don't answer your questions?
Well, I'm going to tell you right now that if I had to go before a committee and I had to swear that I'm telling the truth under oath, and I cannot answer questions either because I'm under, some sort of legal parameters in terms of, maybe I got issues or my agency has issues, then that'll be its own story.
Would you accept when people plead the fifth? Is that something you've reviewed with legal counsel, whether that's something that they can do before legislative inquiry?
Well, if you look at the first release from the front office, I believe when you asked me the question of whether I was going to be doing oversight, you can go back to your own story. And I said, yes, in due time. I think you remember one of the responses from the front was, well, we welcome it. But basically, since most of what's going to be being discussed is currently under legal review, it'll probably not much answers. But it doesn't mean we don't ask the questions.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate your time. We'll get this live in just a few minutes.
Thank you, Troy, and thank you for all the work that you do.
Just a reminder for our audience: when is the oversight hearing? Where will it be, and at what time?
It's set on next Thursday at 9:00, and it's going to be at the Guam Memorial Hospital. And I believe we're going to be on the 4th floor, in their general conference room up there. And that's where we also many of us want to also take a field trip to the panel. I'm hoping that they'll give us that opportunity.
Thank you, Senator. God bless you and have a good day.
You asked, we delivered. Guam AutoSpot is extending our overstock sell-off with the hottest deals on island, like our 2025 GMC Canyon with $4,000 off. Or slide into a brand new Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross, starting at just $24,995. September is your chance to drive big and save even bigger. Visit us today or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com or call 478-AUTO. Guam AutoSpot, where the savings never stop.
Dare to try? Something new? Life's too short!
You gotta chill with the snackable drink.
Life is too short. Hey, you gotta chill.
Mogu Mogu.
Moku Moku!
Buy fuel, get Wendy's. Drive to your nearest 76 Circle K and get free Wendy's. Yes, free. Fuel up with $30 and score your choice of a 6-piece crispy chicken nuggets or a juicy junior cheeseburger deluxe. Fresh, hot, and packed with flavor. But hurry, quantities are limited and this delicious deal won't last long. So hit the road to 76 Circle K, fuel up, and get Wendy's free before it's gone.